All right, it's Jason here, and I have a special individual joining us today. This is Jake Yates. He's the founder of Bloom Living, and Jake recently did a deal, which I'm sure he's going to share more about a real estate deal. Essentially, I think using other people's money. Uh,
hmm
I know we work together, but I'm sure you have other influences and mentors that you've worked with because you really took some of the things that I was talking about, and I think carved out a niche now that you're building in the short-term rental game. So you want to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about what you've done. And then I kind of want to hear your backstory so that we know who you are.
Yeah. So I own a company called Bloom Living, as you alluded to. What we do is we buy multifamily assets. Well, now we're buying other assets too. But essentially what we're doing is we buy multifamily assets in Arizona and Tennessee, and we run those deals as short-term rentals. So the laws for short-term rentals are not very favorable right now. And the reason we chose Arizona and Tennessee is because those are markets that are appreciating, but they also have favorable state level short-term rental laws. So we just bought a fourplex. It's in northwestern Arizona in a secondary market, as most people's first deals tend to be in. And we run the deals as short-term rentals. So we're in the process of renovating the unit now. I have an entrepreneurial background. I'm 27 now. The years are going by. Sometimes I forget how old I am. I'm 27 now. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 19, since I went to college. And I dropped out of college at the age of 22 because I had a marketing agency that was doing quite well. It was a six-figure marketing agency, and I dropped out of college because I was doing well, and then I moved to Las Vegas a couple of years ago. And then when COVID happened, it's actually kind of interesting. I have a bit of a unique story, and we can get into it, as this conversation goes along. But I moved to Las Vegas a couple of years ago, and then when COVID happened, I kind of like instantaneously recognized the opportunity for myself. And it's kind of funny because COVID was like a once in a lifetime opportunity, right?
Totally.
And then directly following COVID, now we're faced with an economic situation that is at the very least potentially a once in a generation opportunity, and at the very most a second once in a lifetime opportunity back to back. So it's an interesting type of thing where I thought I might want to do other things once I did my first deal, but now the opportunities are so lucrative and there's so many of them out there that I'm forced to continue to work 70 hours a week because of the opportunities. So it's cool. It feels good to have the first one under my belt, and obviously, it's only up from here.
I love that. So firstly, I completely concur. 2020, that's when I started Bright Utilities. It was the best year to do deals ever because everyone was hiding in their basement. Everyone was hiding in their basement. I would get on flights. I'd be almost the only guy on the whole airplane.
Yep.
And so I remember I secured the financing I did for my first deal in Bright Utilities. And I'm looking at underwriting now in what they're asking in personal guarantees and how much down and the capital stacks and how all that's playing out. It's so much, it has been so much worse than it was back in 2020 because there wasn't enough deals. And so lenders are like, hey, I have to get the money out the door. So do you know what? Even though you're not my ideal borrower, Jason, I'm willing to take a bet on you because I don't have anybody else knocking on my door. It's funny.
Right.
Because now I think it's going to happen again. We're seeing that people aren't applying for mortgages suddenly as interest rates are going up. And people
Yep.
worry about interest rates going up as acquisitions entrepreneurs, but I think it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
So we'll have to talk more about that. I love your
Oh
perspective.
yeah.
But you, if I'm not mistaken, you were a farm town guy that you went to college and then moved to Vegas. You were from Iowa, right? I think you told me back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised you remember that. It's funny because you did your first deal in Nebraska, and, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure obviously, it's a great situation for you. It was also probably not a great situation because I lived in Iowa for my entire childhood. So I know what it's like out there. But yeah, that's where I come from. I grew up in a town of about 15,000 people, and I moved out to Arizona to go to college. And, I'm still very young. Obviously, Vegas was the only place I've lived besides Arizona, but I grew up mainly in the Midwest. Yes. And it's interesting now because there are more deals and there's more supply in the marketplace, but also the interest rates are higher, so it becomes more expensive. So we're in a bit of an interesting period too, because I don't know if you watch other people and you're alluding to other influences previously. There's a guy that I follow named Patrick Bet-David who's been talking a lot about real estate crash, and so it'll be interesting to see how the market plays out and what happens because there's more supply in the marketplace now. We're still at only 50% of the supply in the marketplace in terms of real estate that we were when COVID started, right? So supply is up, yes, but it's still historically really, really low. And we're also seeing interest rates rise, which will knock down prices. And if inflation goes down too, I think it could be a very interesting situation to go buy, a lot more assets.
So when we teamed up and we were working together, you initially were going to go, if I'm not mistaken, either into self-storage or into the manufactured housing space.
Yep.
We talked about
Yep.
this a little bit before we hit record here, but would you talk through your arc as far as, what you wanted to do when you started into this world of looking to buy cash flowing assets, and then how you pivoted to the short-term rental spot? What got you to pivot?
Yeah, so I'm the type of entrepreneur that I rely like 95% on my gut. Sometimes my gut's wrong, but like 90 to 95% of the time my gut's right. And so what happened was I started reaching out to board candidates for self-storage, and I hit send on the first message, and inside I felt like all torn up. I just felt like it wasn't right for me, right? And so I took a kind of a step back, because I kind of have a niche inside of a niche inside of a niche inside of a niche, right? Doing short-term rentals in multifamily in the real estate asset class. And so I wanted to do real estate because I was going through the M&A education, and I had the different sectors listed that I was potentially going to go into. And then 4 of the 5 sectors were real estate based. And so I realized early on that I wanted to do real estate, and it was just a matter of kind of trying it on, seeing how things felt. And then if it didn't feel right, going on to the next real estate asset class. But when I first got started, it's actually pretty interesting, because I had moved to Vegas as a 23-year-old entrepreneur making 6 figures who was unhappy with my social life. And long story short, I really fixed that problem for myself to the detriment of my business. So when COVID happened, I was not in a good financial situation, but then I'm good at recognizing opportunities, right? So in the first week of COVID, I made a couple of decisions that I think are really important to my story. Number one, I decided to close my marketing agency because I didn't have any passion for it anymore. And I don't know if you wanted me to name drop Dan Pena on this video here, but he has a saying that said it was a video on his website, and he says the biggest mistake that most of you make is that you should have shut the door, locked it, and walked away 5 years ago, because you have no passion for the business anymore, right? So I decided early on in COVID, number one, I'm going to stop doing the marketing agency. Number two, I'm going to do M&A, which is when I bought your course. But number three, since I wasn't in a good financial situation, I said to myself, well, the government's printing trillions of dollars right now. Maybe I could position myself to get some of that money. And long story short, I ended up getting like $185,000 worth of stimulus money. And that really helped me bridge the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. And so I wasn't expecting it when it first happened. There was 3 stimulus bills. I was not expecting 3 of them. My thought process in March was like, oh, maybe I could get like 40 or 50 grand or something from one. And then we can continue to go and we'll see what happens. And then they ended up passing 3. And so it ended up working out for me. So it's kind of funny, because once you start down a path, if you just keep walking, a lot of times it does end up working out for you, because some sort of universal thing that seems to reward courageous decision making.
Especially when sustained. Yeah, I
Yep.
totally agree with that. Sustained
Yes.
over time courageousness, it pays off really nicely if you don't position yourself like a fool. So you had the interest in real estate. You pivoted from some of those other, which I think you were really wise to do, by the way, because you look at like self-storage or the manufactured housing space, and you're talking to a guy who owns a lot of, a number of doors, 30 some odd doors out in Nebraska. And it's a nice property and it's doing well. And yet you buy those kinds of properties at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 times earnings. And then
If you're lucky in multifamily, it's like 4 or 5 caps.
Yeah, it's
not a good situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Grant Cardone style 356 unit Fort Lauderdale properties that are being bought at like a 4 cap. Now that's a whole other world that, we can't talk about, but the point is for somebody like yourself, who I think I imagine you wanted real estate, but you wanted, some legitimate, I'm assuming,
Cash
cash
Yeah.
flow, right? So that was, I assume, the main driving force to getting into the short-term rental game, is because you can do a lot more. You can put a lot more to the bottom by taking a door that maybe does, I don't know, $1,200 a month and turning it into 24 or 36 or 4,800 a month in revenue. That's basically the business model, huh? You're taking
and we were chatting about this before, and I don't know your financial situation, but I would venture to guess, just from what I know about M&A, if you buy $1 million plumbing business, a lot of the times you'll probably take home $15,000 to $50,000 worth of bottom line profit for yourself, which is great, right? In real estate, obviously it's a bit more passive, etc. But if you buy $1 million piece of property, you'd be lucky to make $1,000 a month off of it, right? And so I did the short-term rental part because when we buy properties, that's a way for us to get into that 2 to 6 times multiple range. So we'll make, a good multifamily acquisition is considered like $200 or $300 of profit per door. And when you run it as a short-term rental with luxury, single family, it's even more. But with the multifamily small apartment complexes that we're doing, it's $2,000 to $3,000 of profit per door, which really helps because a lot of times, like we were talking about, real estate is great and there's a lot of good things about it. For example, I had no problems getting a loan for my deal. I called 5 banks and I got 5 term sheets. I would be surprised if I reached out to 20 banks the entire time, right? But on the other side, you have to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity for every single deal. It's low, you know what I mean? It's low cash flow. And so there are good things and bad things about every single sector. But that was the main motivation for me running this as a short-term rental as opposed to just traditional.
Let's talk about raising the bank finance, which, again, it's collateralized by the real estate. So that probably, as you alluded to, wasn't the most difficult part. But talk about raising the bank finance. And if you talk a little bit about, did you come direct with your business plan as far as short-term rental, or did you just keep it very vanilla and raise the bank finances saying, hey, it's multifamily asset, how it's going to cash flow, and so give me the loan? I mean, was there much
I will be the first to admit that I made some mistakes. Am I allowed to swear on this thing?
I'll let it rip, man.
I got absolutely fist fucked by the lending institution I went with because I didn't have options when it came to getting a loan, right? And so because I got my deal on market, right? And so we were kind of locked into a specific, and once the lender knew that we were locked in and we couldn't change it because the seller was being difficult about letting us have a bunch of different lending institutions that we were competing with, we ended up getting a non-favorable loan term. But it's actually funny because we were talking about, before the camera started rolling, about short-term rentals and the legitimacy of the asset class and the fact that it's in its infancy, et cetera, et cetera. And we were discussing that type of stuff. But when you Google it, there's actually about 20 different, I don't think they're banks. I think they're like debt funds. Do you understand? But they're short-term rental lending institutions that lend based on the short-term rental income that the property could potentially generate, right? And so basically what I did was I just looked up short-term rental funding. I had tried to do, I was considering for a while some of those Fannie Freddie products that, you put 3% down or whatever the case may be, but that really limited us because then we could never get anything over 4 units, right? And so we just contacted a bunch of short-term rental lenders, and funny enough, you say this a lot, that the best way to raise money for your deal is to have a good deal. And the good part about the deal that we had was that it had a high debt service coverage ratio. So as I said, I did not call a lot of these companies. I actually did not even ever I did never talk to a lending institution that denied me a term sheet. Every single lending institution I talked to, I got a term sheet from. Right? Now, the other side of that is you always have to raise equity for every single real estate deal. You're almost never going to get like a seller finance deal, right? I mean, you could, but even then, even if you raise 100% of the capital stack through seller finance, for the purposes of our business model, we still need reserves. We probably still need to rehab it. We need bonuses for our people, and we need to furnish it. So even if we got 100% seller finance deal, we would still have to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equity. So for this particular deal, even though even though it wasn't quite a 7-figure deal, we still had to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars via equity. And so that was the more difficult part. The bank part wasn't so bad, but I tell you what, and I'll get into specifics if you want me to, but I will definitely be putting a clause in all of my deals going forward that gives us the leverage to talk to several different institutions at one time. Because what happened was we got locked into one. The institution knew that we got locked into one, and the individual that was peddling the loan changed it to a different type of loan where I'm sure he got a higher bonus off of it. Because once they knew that they had us by the balls, I mean, they just, which is funny because now we'll never do business with them again and they miss out on future deals. But that's how it goes sometimes. And I'll be the first to admit I did make some mistakes along the way, but the bank finance was relatively easy to acquire, at least for us.
What was the clause? I'm a little perplexed, I must say. with regard, what was the clause that kept you from talking to other lenders? Was it something you signed with that lender that basically, was it on their letterhead, something that kept you from?
The issue with it was the fact that it was an on-market deal. And actually, it's funny, we had a member of our board who is also a short-term rental investor as well as a real estate agent in the state of Arizona, which is where our first deal happened. And so there's blanketed templates when you're talking about different deals that you put under contract. And so the negative to the way that we did it was that I didn't have any direct communication with the sellers. It was agent and agent, and then they would, give the terms to us. But the way that the contracts were written, it's like, we are going to be using bank finance from XYZ institution.
Oh, wow.
Sign on the dotted line, right? Wow. And what actually happened was we had a mortgage broker, and he seemed on the surface to be a great mortgage broker. And as soon as we put the deal under contract, he said, "Here are the terms." I said, "This is not what we talked about." And so we couldn't go with the mortgage broker. And so we kind of had to do some, but that's when I started making calls to short-term rental institutions, because we had a broker, right? Which is what you would think on the surface is almost superior to calling the banks yourself, right? But it turned out the terms that he had laid out were not the terms that we ended up getting. So we had to go with a different lender. And then they knew that once we signed on the line, because we had to negotiate with the seller just to change the first lending institution that we had to the second lending institution. You understand? So we had to get them to sign for us to have the right to change it, which is like one of those things where it's like the real estate every asset class has its good and bad parts. The good part is that we have this, the industry I'm in has the strongest on-market deal flow of pretty much any industry, right? But the negative to that is that on-market comes with its own set of pitfalls. But now I know for next time, hey, Mr. Agent, put a clause in the contract in the offer that we say that says that we have the ability to switch lending institutions at our discretion up until the moment we close. So that's a lesson I learned. Is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Got it. I appreciate that transparency. That is not something I've really ever seen with Brighter Living or with Brighter Utilities, with those two businesses that I'm involved in.
The thing is, all the agents, since it was a residential deal, they have like these templates, right, that they get, and then everybody uses the template. And they were both Arizona real estate agents, so they both were like, let's use the template. And of course, I didn't know any better at the time, so I was just like, yeah, great, we have something in our contract, also just sign it, close my eyes and sign it. You know what I mean? But yeah, so that was an interesting experience.
One thing I'll say too that you brought up, I've seen this go bad almost always. Two brokers on the same deal is I've never seen anyone on the buy side say, oh, there was the buy side broker and the sell side broker, and I loved it, or realtor, whatever the hell we're calling it. I've never heard someone say that it was a good experience. I've heard a lot of horror stories. I've heard your horror story, other horror stories of how the communication gets messed up. It's telephone and somebody says X, and by the time it gets over here, it's completely misconstrued. Information doesn't even get passed along. They don't deliver what they're supposed to deliver. The less people in the middle of the transaction.
The good news is, and this was blind luck for us, but the seller and the seller's agent both had a lot of integrity. So when we went to do the inspection, I chatted with the sell side agent, and she was a nice woman, and they were stand-up people. They're not the type of people that like to screw people over. And so luckily for us, we lucked out with that. But that's why, so for example, one of the pieces of infrastructure I'm going to be putting in place before the next deal is a commission-only sales individual that will be responsible for the off-market deal flow. Yeah. So that's the solution that we came up with.
Sure. I'm a huge fan of that. I've got one of my business partners now. He really started in that position as kind of an off-market deal flow guy, and now we're partners. But he and having that individual or those individuals in your team is immense. Okay, so good stuff on that front. Let's talk about the equity side if you want to talk about it a little bit, because you basically alluded earlier that the debt side, because it was real estate, and one of the benefits of the real estate was everyone was ready. All the lenders were ready. All the lending institutions were ready to provide you that term sheet. What were your challenges? We spoke a little bit offline about this. What were your challenges with equity? How'd you get it done? And what are you looking to do for because I know you're going to continue on the hunt for more deals.
It was tough. This won't make me look good, but it was tough for me to hide. I wouldn't say desperation, but it was tough for me to hide that because it got to be a very stressful, right? Because if you're putting a deal under contract, you're getting a term sheet. If you're getting a term sheet from a bank, it really doesn't matter if the term sheet comes on Tuesday or if it comes on Friday. But when you have a set date that the deal is supposed to close on, it's like every 72 hours makes a difference, right? And so I would say the most difficult part for me was the fact that there was just like this ticking clock, and I could not get it at. It was in the back of my mind 24/7 for the last 4 months we were doing this thing, where it's like May 27th, let's close it May 27th. You know what I mean? Like, and then so it was this issue where we talked to a lot of people. I think I maybe turned some of them off with just the eagerness, maybe. But we ended up raising about 200 grand from three different investors actually, and so it ended up working out. But it came down to the last kind of second, where the last piece that we got to put the deal across the goal line. Basically, so even once you raise money, there's still a process that needs to happen. Just because the money gets in the bank account on Tuesday doesn't mean that you're ready to close a deal on Wednesday, because the lending institution, they have their process that they need to go through. Everybody has their own process that they need to go through. And so it basically got down to like the last 72 to 96 hours before we were reaching that point where even if we got the money, it would be too late, right? And so it ended up coming down to the wire, and I gave away more equity than I wanted to, but we ended up getting the deal done. And so now obviously we learned from it. I have an assistant now I would spend like 30 hours a week reaching out to people, right? Now I have an assistant that handles all of that, and I just take the calls, and it helps me focus on, more long-term solutions, right? Because there's a saying like, what helps you in the short term will usually hurt you in the long term. And what helps you in the long term will usually hurt you in the short term, right? And so I was required to execute I laid some groundwork before, because everybody says, you got to call the lenders, you got to raise the money from the investors, you got to find a deal, and you got to do it all at the same time. But I'm a really big, especially for me, I find that if I try to chase two rabbits, I'll typically catch zero of them. So I tried to kind of set it up through outreach on LinkedIn, et cetera, for like the 60 days before we put the deal under contract. But I ended up moving off of that just because I wasn't getting the deal flow momentum that I wanted to, because I was trying to do three different things at the same time. Right. And so it was just one of those things where I had to give like a short-term Band-Aid type solution to the issue. Whereas, now it's you raise more money, when you play more of the long-term game, where you're not asking for money the first time you meet somebody, you're just vibing with them, you build the rapport, you set something up in the future. Maybe you take them to dinner after you talk a couple of times, and it's more of because it's, I actually find a huge overlap. It's more, raising money from investors is more seduction than anything else. I find a lot of overlap between that particular, task and other, I guess, things that involve seduction, right? So it's just more of that. And when you're seducing, a lot of times it just takes time, right? For the comfort to build, for the report to happen, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the biggest thing, is that we were trying to give a short-term solution to something that probably required a long-term solution. So but we ended up getting it done. And it's funny because I went to about a month before the deal closed, I went to a fund manager conference, and I remember talking to a guy who owned like 60 or $70 million worth of real estate. And I was talking to him about it. He's like, well, if you only got 30 days to do it, a lot of times when your back's up against the wall like that, you figure it out. And that, I ended up doing that. But, definitely with future deals will be different strategies.
Yeah, I love that. So I've never heard anyone's story in getting their first deal done where it's like really clean and perfect. And
right.
The way you go from 0 to 1 is almost guaranteed going to be very different from how you go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, et cetera.
You have to embrace the chaos.
You really do. You have to be willing. It categorically will be easier for you to do your next deal than it was to do this one. And you'll get better terms, and you'll keep more of the equity.
Sure.
It's a natural byproduct. But you're right, as far as I loved what you said about raising equity being something of seduction. I compare it to it's like a romantic relationship, right? I love the dating kind of corollary to that. And it's true. You need time. And I think I've given this advice a lot of like, hey, spend 20 or 30% of your time just like building relationships with people who have, a high net worth and who have liquidity, who have 401ks, they have IRAs, they have cash, they have underperforming stocks or whatever they have. Talk to these folks months in advance. And it feels really anticlimactic because it's, hey, nice to meet you. I don't have a deal yet, but this is what I'm going to be doing. And hey, when I do have something, I'd love to be able to pick up the phone and talk to you. I think in movie, it's like movies like Wolf of Wall Street. You see Jordan Belfort. He's like, listen, pal, we've got this stock and it's going to the moon. I'm going to need you to get your wallet out right now and let's put the money in and let's get rich. It's like that idea of hammer closing right in the moment is sexy. I think it's like Hollywood glamorizes that. And so I think it's really easy to underestimate how important the romantic period of time is for raising equity. So I completely concur. Months, if you can talk to someone and make that introduction and wait months for capital.
And I know, so I actually went through this education. Is this guy, his name is Bridger Pennington. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He basically exclusively teaches funds and how to raise equity, et cetera, et cetera. And so a good tip that I got from him was, especially with real estate, right? You're involved in all these Facebook groups. You have a million deals a day in these Facebook groups. You say to this person, hey, listen, I'm a fund manager. A lot of things come across my desk every single day. I'd love to send you some good deals if you'd be interested. They say yes. You send them deals, that are good over the course of 2 or 3 months. And then eventually you're like, hey, there's actually this really good deal, my fund that we're currently raising money for. And right, that's a good way to do it. Or you can do the whole take them to dinner or whatever. Like, do you want to be on my podcast, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but yeah, it's definitely more of a, the over eagerness will kill a lot of your seduction efforts in any capacity. And so it's always nice to not have to have it. Do you know what I mean?
1,000%. The other one I did when I went from 0 to 1 is, and I got pushback from my team because I remember I said, look, I don't want capital raising to be the key, the thing I'm spending the majority of the time in and doing my first deal, because I know that I need to put twice as much work in for due diligence because I don't know that much about the asset class. At the time I was getting the manufactured housing sector. I know that there's all these things I'm going to be, blindsided by as a first-time deal maker. And so what I did was essentially gave more equity. I created a thick equity arbitrage. And my whole premise, and it ended up working, was basically this idea of, I want the deal to sound so good to the investor that they immediately say, holy crap, how are you able to give me this? So, and it was based on an arbitrage where I basically gave like a 2-to-1 split plus a little preferred, like 8% cash flow plus almost a 2-to-1.
You're 100% right. I actually struggled to raise money for the first 2 months. And then at that conference I was alluding to, they were like, you got to increase the offer, et cetera. So it was like overnight, it was like turning on a light switch. I was like, because I had this offer and the thought process in my mind was like, let's say it's 6 months in the future. What would be a bigger regret? To hold on to every single precious percentage of my equity and not be able to close the deal, or say, I gave away a little too much, but I closed the deal.
But I've got a track record now.
Yes, exactly. I chose the second option and it ended up working out, even though I gave up more than I wanted to.
Yeah, that's what I did. And I don't regret it for a heartbeat. The video that came to my mind that motivated that strategy was, you brought up Pena, who I have a little bit of a love-hate with, but the guy did teach me a lot. But I think his best stuff is the 1990 stuff, the stuff.
Oh, 100%. He was so much more enthusiastic back then.
Well, there's a video, great. Yeah, I loved his old stuff. And there's a video, I'm sure someone can find it somewhere, where he's up on the stage in a 3-piece suit and he's like, give equity in your deals. Give away equity in your deals. And I just
doesn't say that anymore though.
What's that?
He doesn't say that very much anymore though.
Hence why I have a love-hate relationship with the guy.
Okay. Yeah.
Amen. Right. So now it's 100% leverage, 100% commercial debt, all this stuff that candidly, the point is not to go down
it exists, but it's like seeing a unicorn or something. You know
what I mean? Every deal. Look, I was on the record on YouTube saying that 100% seller finance deals are pipe dreams. You shouldn't bet on it. You shouldn't expect it. And then 6 months later, I did a 100% seller finance deal, which I did do for KB Mechanical. Great. It was a one-off. It probably will never happen again. And I still believe that advice of don't expect 100% seller finance deals is valid, because if you bet on this unicorn type of a deal, you don't think about speak to lenders. You don't think about building a set of relationships with a multitude of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals. You're shooting yourself in the foot by expecting this 1 in a million outcome. So
you prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah. And keep obviously the lion's share of the equity. You want 51% or more, but like if you have 60% of the deal versus 90%, but you get a track record, like what's really going to matter in the long term? Your first deal is not going to be the one that makes you fantastically wealthy. It's
a series of
Yeah, a series of deals over 5, 10, 15 years, whatever your time frame may be, and you get better at each subsequent deal you do. As you bring these different deals together, you're increasing the exit value when you decide to exit someday. You're taking a bunch of, I'm going to use more of a business reference, but you're buying a bunch of businesses at 3 times earnings, and then you package them and build them and integrate them for a decade, and you sell at 12 times earnings. Like, okay, so what? You only have 60% of the very first deal you did. You did 8 or 10 or 15 more deals over the next 7 or 10 years. Like,
And as the asset value increases, you can always refinance them out of the deal. So actually, it's funny because this is exactly what we're doing. So when we take the commercial multifamily deals, 5 units or more, and we buy them, obviously the value of the deal is based on the NOI. But once we flip it to a short-term rental, the NOI is 7 times more. So all of a sudden, the asset's worth 5, 6, 7 times more than initially. You can refinance the deal, cash the investors out, give them double the money they put in or something like that, and they're happy and you're happy, and you gave away the equity, but then you increase the asset value, you refinance them out, and now you have 100% of the equity, which is what I'll be doing with this deal. You know what I mean? So maybe I did give up a lot of equity, but in the end of the day, my buddies give me a lot of crap for this because I gave up so much. But I'm gonna refinance them. Like eventually, I'll have 100% equity in the deal, right? So it's not as big of a deal as people would maybe make it seem.
I think there's a lot of people who keep from getting across that 0 to 1 threshold because of pride, because of ego, and then of course fear and laziness. Those are the obvious two. But the pride and the ego is I think a massive one, where people think, well, I've done all this hard work, like I deserve. It's all of this like me focused attention of like what I deserve and what I want and what I need and what I've earned and all. It's like the market doesn't care what you want. The market doesn't care about your petty little ego. The market doesn't care.
Nobody gives a fuck how hard you tried. They only remember if you did it or not. You either make it happen or you have excuses for why it didn't happen. You know what I mean? And it's just like, at the end of the day, that was what I was telling myself too. I was like, nobody cares how hard you're trying. Nobody cares that you're getting low sleep. Nobody cares you're working all the time. You're going to make it happen or you're not going to make it happen. It's being a results oriented person as opposed to, I've tried really hard, I deserve it. Oh, I gave it a good shot. I tried really hard. But did you know what I mean? At the end of the day, you either did it or you didn't do it.
This is my thing.
There you go. There you go.
All right. Like that's it. Nobody cares. Work harder. I mean, it's so simple. But it's very true. And in this world, I'll say this as well. This is just macro. And because you and I have gone back and forth before this, and you said something to me about like 2020 was like the best time ever, except like there's another one coming now in 2022 with these great buying opportunities that I think are coming. And part of what makes it so exciting to me is there's not many young people. You said you're 27, I'm 30. There's not many people in our age cohort that are ready to do this kind of work, that are ready to sacrifice and to just do whatever the hell it takes to go across, to sacrifice, to work their face off, to not get everything they were expecting on the first deal, and to still say, hell yeah, let me go buy a few more.
And
right?
I have a spoiler alert. The price is everything. Just FYI for anybody wondering. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to give up all of your time. You have to give up all of your energy. I didn't do anything with my friends for months and months and months prior to closing the first deal. I said no to everything. My girlfriend had to like fight and claw to get a couple hours a week of my time. That's the price is everything. And so you got to be prepared to give up everything.
Yeah.
At least for the first one.
Amen. Internet got a little weird there for a half second, but yeah, basically you have to be willing to bleed your face off, sacrifice everything.
You're still static, by the way. It's just there you go.
All right, let's roll. So you got the deal done. Any big surprises that happened in the couple weeks post close? I know I had a few. I didn't realize how little management there was in place with my first deal. That was a bit. I should have known more, but it didn't really connect until after I closed. That was for me. Was there anything for you that kind of whacked you over the head and said, "Welcome to the world of doing deals"?
Not really. I mean, I got a lot like once. So I recognized when I was there for the inspection, because it was only 4 units my first deal. It's pretty as far as M&A goes, it's a very small deal, but it'll end up being worth 7 figures at the end of the day. But I recognized when they went for the inspection, they were all very like tight knit, very close, all 4 of the tenants, and so it was kind of one of those things where once one of them got my number, then it was like 5 different maintenance requests in a day, you know what I mean? And so everybody had something that they wanted to be fixed, et cetera, et cetera. And then I had to come after all of them I sent the letters to like, you pay rent this way. Then I kind of had to come after them You know what I mean? For paying it, you know, because a lot of them, you know, until you actually apply pressure, they're not going to pay. And so there's a lot of shit tests, for lack of a better term. But it wasn't this whole. So I have to be clear though, because I haven't really started running my first deal yet. Yes, we're managing the property. Yes, we started the renovation process. Yes, we're going to be kicking all the tenants out. But it's one of those things where it's like, you know, I have to do a little bit of work before it ends up becoming the thing that we had, you know, visualized. And you saw the deal. It looks like a dump. We're going to be renovating it. Or, you know what I mean? We're going to be painting the whole exterior. We're going to be adding a bunch of landscaping to the outside. And so I will preface it by saying, you know, the real work hasn't necessarily started yet, but it's about to. But I'm not too worried about the operations part of it, just because I haven't had a job for like a decade, right? So I have the experience with the operations. I've had contractors work with me before. I've had assistants for years. So I'm not too worried, and especially too because I have 2 members of my board that own a ton of short-term rental real estate, and I'll be adding another board member who is a super host on Airbnb and those other short-term rental platforms. I'll be adding another board member in the coming weeks to my team, and so we have the infrastructure in place already. Where one of my board members made an exit. It was an arbitrage business, but it was one of those things where he would rent out a place in Asia is where he did it because it was the highest spread, right? But he exited an arbitrage company, and so he has all the operating procedures, et cetera, et cetera. So luckily, I mean, that's why we build the team, right? Because we need them once, you know, to an extent, especially as you're doing your first couple of deals. So I have the team in place to run the operations, but you know, the real work hasn't necessarily started yet. But I don't, you know, obviously the only thing you can ever count on in entrepreneurship is that everything will go wrong. It'll take longer than you want it to, and it'll be more expensive than you initially thought it would be. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not surprised when shit hits the fan anymore, but I'm sure it will as we continue down this path.
Yeah, amen. And I think you're smart to get the right team that has the industry experts, in my opinion, are the most underrated part of the whole building a deal making team, or building, whether you call it a board, you call it what you will. When it comes to assembling your team that is going to go out into the marketplace and do deals, yes, having a savvy lawyer is important. Having an accountant that is really good at analyzing tax returns, balance sheets, knows how to look for funny stuff, all of that is important. Having someone who's really good at taxes, yeah, all those things are really relevant. But the industry expert, or industry experts plural, in my opinion, are the game changers, because with their savvy, everything is downhill, and without their savvy, everything is uphill.
I mean, I did a deal, that first deal, I didn't have a lawyer on my board, as you recall. So it was, you know what I mean? So it's a living testament that you don't necessarily need all those things. I had good intentions, and that's a whole nother story that I'm happy to get into if you want me to. But yeah, I couldn't have done it without my industry experts, but I am living proof that I did do it without a lawyer on my board. And you know what I mean? So it's industry experts are super, super important, I think. And they're definitely the most important part of the team, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And the other thing too with lawyers, it's funny, you go out and get a hotshot lawyer, and that hotshot lawyer is used to doing deals between 50 million to 500 million and upwards of $1 billion. And suddenly you give them a $1.6 million purchase agreement or something to that effect on boilerplate, you know, kind of a template. And it's funny, but they're not even used to looking at an agreement like that. They're used to 40 pages of reps and warranties and 20 pages of indemnification clauses. And here there's like 6 indemnification lines. So
they tend to overkill with the negotiations too, which can tend to turn off some of the sellers that maybe only own 1 or 2 properties, you know?
I actually, on my first deal, and, you know, he's still my partner now, but he came in hot with this like big lawyer, New York style of treating the deal. It was almost like you imagine like the 8 lawyers like coming into like the old like KKR deal making team, like they all come in and like the huge suite, like you could tell that was kind of the world where he comes from. And this deal was just like a folksy, you know, barely over $1 million deal. And it got really tense, not in a good way, where the seller was almost like, you know what, like he was ready to walk, like, screw this. I don't want to deal with this guy. I'm not even sure I want to sell anymore.
Right.
And I made some goofy joke and kind of released tension. And then after the call ended, I talked to my guy, and I was like, look, I'm sure all of that is just fair play when you're working a $650 million deal, but this is a $1.6 million deal
there's such a thing as the overkill for the negotiations.
Yeah.
It reaches a point in time where it's better to just be agreeable and likable, as opposed to there are times to bring out the ball buster, but it's like, if you're always busting people's balls, then it carries no weight when you know what I mean? When you really need it to have an impact, right?
Without an absence, or without light, there it's all black, right? You have to have the yin and the yang for that to have an effect. Yeah, I agree with that. And one thing I'll say too on smaller deals, these kind of first and second deals that people do that I've done, that you've done, these sellers are not always cutthroat people. They're very emotional about their business in many instances. They have a deep tie and connection to their
Yeah.
You deal with a lot of emotional stuff.
Yeah, I got a bunch of income statements on Word docs for the first deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finance, baby. Let's do a deal.
It made me feel good though, because I felt almost over prepared. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it ended up being to the benefit, and we actually ended up getting about $60,000 off the purchase price for the first deal, because I had saw somebody say, like, once you have it, go take the inspection. You take the inspection, and you, like, I Google, like, okay, XYZ plumbing fix, and then I Google it, and it says it's $1,500 to $300. I say it's $300, right? And you go down the list, the most expensive, blah blah blah. And but then we took it to the seller, and we're like, we need $60,000 off the purchase price. And he's like, okay. I said, damn, I should have asked for like 90 or 100 or something like that. You know what I mean? Because he said yes so quickly on the first try. Probably could have gotten more, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. I hear you. It's funny. I would have loved to have negotiated a little harder on my first deal. I remember my second deal, I was working the price with the seller, and I remember I made him an offer, and he's like, we was over the phone, at this point. He's like, you're close. And I have a good relationship with this guy. He worked around the business for a couple hundred hours after we closed. But I remember I gave him the number. He's like, you're close. You're so close. If you come a little higher. He was just working it. You want to talk about seduction. He was playing the fiddle there with his feet up on the desk, drinking a glass of cab. He was just having a time of his life.
A lot easier to negotiate when you don't need the deal to happen.
1,000%, which they were, hence the motivated seller being the, the total 8-ball in a deal if you have an extremely motivated seller. Now you have to ask why there's that extreme motivation. Is it because it's a garbage business or a garbage property in your instance?
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean it is. But anyways, so, okay, you've got this deal done. You're in the process of converting it to short-term from long-term. What's next? I mean, it sounds like you're actively looking for deals is it Arizona and Tennessee, I think you said, correct?
So we're expanding to Tennessee. So as I alluded to earlier, the biggest thing about short-term rentals is the legislation. And we had talked about how it's kind of like the marijuana industry, where it's almost like self-storage was 20 years ago. I say that to say we're like in the absolute infancy of this asset class, right? And so a lot of places, for example, here in Vegas, you would think, I live here in Las Vegas, that this short-term rental business is just booming. Well, actually, in 90% of Clark County, it's illegal to run a short-term rental. And I had a buddy who he bought a property, put a mortgage on it, and then was flexing on social media that he's running it as a short-term rental. And I'm looking at him like, I know this is in a place where it's illegal to do this. It's not a matter, they have an active task force that are shutting these things down. It's not a matter of if you get busted, it's a matter of when. And then comes the crippling 6-figure fine that completely obliterates your business, right? So the cool thing about Arizona and Tennessee is, like, the way that laws work in America is you have the city laws, local laws, state laws, which supersede the local laws, and federal laws, which supersede the state laws. Well, Arizona and Tennessee are the only two states that are number one in an appreciating marketplace. And then number two, they have state level protections that say, we have decided and made it clear that it is illegal for a city or a county or a municipality to regulate the way that somebody and restrict the way that somebody runs this property, which basically in plain English means that we can run the property as we see fit, right? And so that's why Arizona and Tennessee, like I said, Florida is the third state, but there's some weird stuff going on with Miami, which makes me, and also Florida, real estate's a lot more expensive than Arizona and Tennessee. So you don't get as big of a bang for your buck, right? So you just buy, like, because it'll make a comparable amount of top line revenue, but your expenses, your debt service will be more expensive. So even though Florida's technically the third state with those laws, because of the things that are happening in Miami and because of the asset prices, we're just doing Arizona and Tennessee. My plan now is, and I have a board call tomorrow. I haven't run this by my board yet, but I've decided I want to do it. So it's probably going to happen. We're going to start a fund, and we're going to go buy a bunch of this real estate that I was alluding to earlier. The vision is 100 doors of short-term rental real estate, right? And so basically how that's going to work, and it's cool. It's actually really cool. It's almost like a magic trick, because we're going to buy it for like $1 million, $2 million. But then once we renovate it and run it as a short-term rental, the NOI is going to be 5 times higher. And all those properties are going to be worth 5 times what we bought them for, right?
Yep.
Then we can refinance all our investors out. They get a lucrative return. They're happy about it. Now we own 100% equity in all these deals. And that's kind of like, because we're still very young, right? We're both in our 20s. And it's almost, I view it as almost like a really solid foundation, financial foundation to build the rest of my life on. And so that's what we're going to do. And, this deal could probably make me enough money eventually to pay all my bills. But now that I've kind of had a taste for it, I just want to do more deals. You know what I mean? So that's our plan. And the cool thing about a fund, because I found syndications very stressful, because it's just not a fun experience being under the gun like that. And I can tolerate the stress, right? But I'd rather not if I can help it. And so we're looking to do, it's going to be park-owned mobile homes, luxury single family portfolios, and then multifamily apartment complexes that we're going to be buying in key locations in Arizona and Tennessee. We're looking at an 18-unit now that's right next to a national park, gets 12 million tourists per year, but the population of the city is only 4,000 people. So there's a lot of really interesting submarkets in both of those states that we're looking to do some deals on. So it's exciting.
Arizona, Tennessee, those are your 2 states. The state laws protect you. They allow you to do deals. And then what you were sharing as well is that you have the ability to go to these 2nd and 3rd tier markets that otherwise are kind of uninteresting, but they have these really hot tourist destinations. And so my reply to that was, I would imagine that would let you get even a higher spread on some of these properties you'd be buying, because people aren't looking to go to a small market like that normally to buy real estate, but because you have a different vision for what that real estate could be compared to traditional landlords or traditional property buyers, you're seeing disproportionate value in something that others aren't. I think that's awesome. That's a unique competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's called the Blue Ocean Strategy, which I'd never read the book before, but it came to find out that I inadvertently created one of those. And it's funny too, because in a lot of these submarkets, there's such a supply-demand imbalance for housing. So for example, it makes our deal safe, because the marketplace we bought our first deal in, there was like a 30-person wait list last time there was an open unit available. So we can charge like $300, $400, $500 more in rent than what they're getting currently. And it's cool because there's 2 million tourists that come to this location every single year. But they come because it's right on the Colorado River. It's in a town called Bullhead City. It's right on the Colorado River. On the opposite side of the Colorado River is Laughlin, Nevada, which Nevada has great gambling laws, and casinos attract everybody all the time. I live in Vegas, so I don't really gamble, but they have like 12, 15 casinos in Laughlin, Nevada, and they get 2 million tourists per year. But Laughlin, Nevada only has a population of 6,000 people. So there's a huge short-term rental supply-demand imbalance, where even now you're hearing a lot of rumblings about like people like not getting bookings or whatever. But I'm looking at all the comps in the neighborhood we bought in, and all the short-term rentals in the neighborhood they still have 85, 90% occupancy booked 2 to 3 months out. And so it's a really interesting opportunity in a lot of these places, because, the other deal that we're looking at, it gets 12 million tourists per year, and the population in that city is only 4,000, right? And so there's just more demand for short-term rental housing than there is supply, which is obviously a great thing for us when we come in and run these deals as short-term rentals. It makes it a lot more lucrative.
I'm excited for you. I knew that you would be successful if you applied yourself when we first met. And I was really stoked when you shifted to short-term rentals, because I sincerely think there's a much more interesting play to be had than buying a whole bunch of self-storage at a 6 cap and selling it all for a 4 cap, or buying a whole bunch of mobile home parks at a 7 cap and selling it at a 4.5 cap. Like, yeah, you could do it. You could make money. Obviously those are good long-term assets to hold, but there's not a home run play there, in my opinion, like there is in what you're doing. So I think your deals have
And we were talking about earnings multiples, right? You buy a plumbing business for 3 times, sell them for 12 times. You got 6 of them put together. It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing here. We're like, we'll get a higher multiple once we flip it to short-term rentals. But then also, as the asset class legitimizes, I predict, and of course I could be wrong, right? But I predict that we'll see cap rates start to compress as the asset class becomes more legitimate, right? Much like we're seeing in the multifamily sector now, where we're seeing things sell for like a 3 cap. Grant Cardone's buying these things for like literally like a 3 cap. And so I think that because this is what I tell everybody who's considering, they're like, what's our exit play here, right? We can't sell this 4-unit property because it's residential multifamily. It doesn't matter if it's making more money. I said, no, we're going to sell a portfolio of all these properties put together, right? So we're going to get a premium for this specific property. And as we put it more together, the multiples increase further. And then as we hold it, as the asset class comes more into the mainstream, then we'll see the cap rates compress even further. So I'm excited about the potential, because maybe even as running it as a short-term rental, we still wouldn't make as much cash flow as if we bought $1 million plumbing business, but we could create a significant amount of net worth for ourselves because we're going to be increasing the price of all the assets, right?
Through the process of consolidation. And one thing that you have the ability to take advantage of that, for example, I won't, is, as you said, you're at an early adoption stage within a new and quickly budding asset class. We saw this with self-storage. We saw it with the mobile home park business, where you saw cap rates compress over the last 20, 25 years. It wasn't just because it was a low interest rate environment, though, yeah, that had a play, but a lot of it was assets like self-storage and the mobile home park assets. They became far more accepted. I'm sure you've seen like the adoption curve. It's like the super early adopters, middle, late, and then super laggard adopters. Self-storage and mobile home parks 25 years ago were like pretty far out here on like the super early adopter stage, but you saw that move to where institutional investors and retail investors alike adopted those assets, and you see the cap rates compress. So if the same thing happens with short-term rental, which you see a lot of young people. There's plenty of ads that have been ran on like, hey, like, let me show you how to like do the Airbnb hacks and stuff. So it's like young people recognize it. And, obviously as that continues to move towards the middle of the normal curve, I would imagine what you're talking about. I see the logic in what you're saying, that the cap rates would compress simply as a basis of more people accept.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's especially too when you own the assets, you can get the no taxes on the income you make. You can get the appreciation, the principal pay down, versus if you just arbitrage it, all you get is the cash flow, which is even less than what you would get if you just bought the asset.
You make way more. Just the tax write-offs. One of the great things about real estate are all the tax breaks that you get, right? So, owning, what you're doing to me is far more interesting than the idea of I'm going to go lock into 5 leases and play that arbitrage. It's a cash flow play, certainly. But if you don't own the property, the landlord can change their mind.
The HOA can change their mind. Yeah, it's not a good situation.
No, what you're doing has actual real leverage. You own the thing that you're deploying or converting. So, dude, I love it. Anything else that you think we should dive into before we roll? We talked about how you raised your money. We talked about what your long-term plan is. Talked about your story. Anything else that's top of mind for you right now?
Not really. I have a lot to say on the topic, and so I'll be putting out my own content over the course of the next couple of months. But I think in the context of just exploring how I went 0 to 1, I think I said everything that I wanted to say. And definitely, if you ever get into the short-term rental game, let me know, and we can discuss. And I'm happy to bring value in any way that I can. And hopefully, this conversation brought value to whoever ends up watching it. So.
It's been a great conversation. Maybe we'll do another one of these sometime down the road once you continue to ascend as you are. And I told you before we recorded, I have flirted around with the idea of buying condos here in Tampa Bay and renting them out at some point. It's something that
the only issue with condos is the HOA.
Got it.
So like for instance, this is a condo right here that I live in, but the HOA said that you can do short-term. Actually, if it's in a good location, like for example here, you can't do short-term rentals less than 30 days. But if you do short-term rentals 31 days plus, then all of a sudden they'll let you do it. And you have people, for example, this apartment here, a lot of these are places that are like $2,000 to $2,500 in rent per month. But a lot of these short-term rentals are getting 5, 6, 7 grand, And so you can still do it even in the context. I would never do it under an HOA just because I really do not like not having control over things. Right. And so the idea that somebody could just come in and shut me down is not very palatable for me. But there are people who are definitely doing it very successfully.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I did some homework on where I live as well, and I was looking at the what I pay, and then I was looking at how much it could go for if I did a short-term rental. And yeah, there's like a 3 to 4x multiple, it looks like. So it's intriguing. But anyways, okay, so you're at bloomliving.co. Is that your website?
Yeah. Have you looked at my website, by the way?
It looks eerily familiar to a website that
they say good artists copy and great artists steal. So
you know what? It's nice to see someone who has one that looks like mine, who's had some success. I had a couple of people that didn't do anything who had a website like mine. It's like, if you're gonna have your website look like mine, be successful. So now that
it's disrespectful if you copy and then you don't end up getting it done, right?
You're gonna copy the website, then come on now, knock them dead. What's the plug though? Where do the people find you?
It's Jake Yates on Instagram. Happy to connect. And I'll just say this personally. I mean, I'm happy to help anybody who has any questions. But I don't possess the empathy that you probably have to deal with the consulting side of it. So I have no program to sell anybody, right? I have nothing to offer you in that regards. But if you're, a hustler and you are taking a lot of action towards it, I'm happy to help any way I can, answer a couple of questions, shoot me a message. My email is jake@bloomliving.co. So reach out, if you guys have any questions. Or I know that there was a couple of people in some of your calls that were also doing apartment complexes. So I'm happy to help, any way possible. I have a buddy who's doing a fund of funds by investing in short-term rental funds. So he has a blanket fund, and he invests in other funds. And so I've helped him out a bit in terms of his outreach to investors, et cetera. And I'm happy to help out anybody else. And I guess, you asked what I will say one thing, because a lot of my friends are into the crypto stuff. Right. And I tell them about what I'm doing in the M&A world and the real estate, et cetera. And I think this is a good piece of advice for people, because it's like, I tell them what I'm doing, and they're like, that sounds really hard. And I'm like, that's the exact reason that you want to do it. The only reason you want to do it is because it's hard, because nobody's willing to do it. And once you do it, now you have that moat where it's like, you have to build the board, you have to find the deal, you have to raise the money, you have to go to the fucking bank, you have to figure out the operations. It's like all these things just to even be in the same game. Obviously, I'm like a neophyte in this new world that I find myself in, having, I'm like the poorest person in the room, right? But at least I'm in the room, you know what I mean? And so I think that the fact that it's so hard is the exact reason that you should do it. And if it's hard, it's supposed to be hard. You know what I mean? If somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, it's really hard. It's supposed to be hard. And that's the exact reason you should do it, because that's the moat around your castle. So
1,000%. That there's no better words to be said after that. So let's just cut it. That was gold.
Cheers, man. Let me know if you're ever in Vegas.
I will. And if you're ever in Tampa Bay, it's mutual.
All right.
All right, man. Cheers.
Cool, man. Take it easy.
Peace.